Hey up now. Good to see you. Starting the bank holiday early, are you? Ah, right. Fair enough. Won't be staying long then. Swift pint and off home to bed. Ah, early start, is it? Oh. Ah. Okay. You kept that one quiet, didn't you? Congrats, anyway. So you're off to meet the parents then? Staying the weekend? Nerve-wracking stuff. Gonna have to mind your P's and Q's. Be on your best behaviour. Here, I'll give you a tip. Grin and nod. Eat what they offer and help do the dishes. Goes a long way. Trust me. There you go. Preempted you, didn't I? There's a couple of yous coming. Going back some years now. Jacob and Rowan, if memory serves. Met at uni. Both of them studying agriculture. Odd couple, really. He were quite straight-laced, whereas she were a bit new agey. Into crystals and all that caper. Had a bit of a fey quality about her, you know. Guess opposites attract. They've been together since the end of their first year. And we're still getting strong 3 years later. So, clearly doing something right. One odd thing though. He'd never met her parents. Dunno why. Just the way it were. Don't like to pry, see. Anyway, with the Friday before May Day, and Jacob comes in, all mithered. Says to him, "Here, what's put thee in this mood?" Turns out Roa decided it was time for him to meet her parents. She were going down there for the May Day festival, and her dad had asked, why not bring that fella of yours down with you? So she'd asked Jacob, and he'd agreed. It put the wind up him though. Jacob always found social situations around new people a bit awkward. He was kind of an introvert. Not only that, but for the life of him he couldn't find the village where Rose's parents lived on the sat-nav or on Google Maps. "What's it called?" I asked him. Belschurch. Well, I'd never heard of it either. Turns out it were located on the county border between Somerset and Dorset, but for some reason lost to history, falling under the jurisdiction of neither. We're kind of one of them hidden places, located in the creases of old road atlases. In the end, he needn't have fretted. Rose said she were going to drive down anyway. So the bank holiday weekend passed. We did a banging trade here. We're a particularly hot one, see. And on Tuesday, normal service resumed. I'd only just opened up when Jacob came slinking in. Looked right worse for wear. His skin had this yellowish tinge to it that betrayed hard weekends of carousing. "Went well then?" I asked. "It were fine," he replied. Well, as we both know, when someone says something were fine, generally means it were far from. "Didn't go well then?" "Nah, I dunno. It's all a bit hazy." You ever come away from summit with this feeling that maybe you've been party to something you shouldn't have? Well, that's every hangover, isn't it? We've all had the beer fear at one time or t'other. But he insisted it were more than that. He proceeded to give me a somewhat fractured account of his weekend. They'd set out early Saturday morning. He'd slept most of the way down there. Didn't travel well, Jacob. More an hour on the road, and he'd start nodding. Came to just as they arrived at the village outskirts. First thing he sees is this right horrible looking scarecrow, standing sentinel in the middle of a wheat field. Scared the shit out of him, apparently. How he described it, it were an abomination of mouldering rags, stitched into the mockery of human form. Atop its head, for some reason he couldn't fathom, a pair of antlers. He asked Ro what it were all about, but she just gave him the vague answer of the Summer King, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. So Jacob were grateful to discover that Belschurch itself was a little bit more inviting. The atypical rural English village. You know, a church, pub and post office, all equidistant from each other, quaint little houses, even a pretty little wishing well. Kind of place you'd retire to, providing you had a decent pension plan, of course. But as awesome and sleepy as Belschurch seemed, Jacob was soon to discover it were far from. On arriving at Ro's parents' house, they barely had time to put the bags down before Ro's dad announced, "Let's get to the Jack." That were the village pub, the Jack in the Green, called the Jack for short. As it goes, Ro's family were quite well to do. Her dad was something of a land baron, owning most of the farmland in the general vicinity, which he let out to local farmers and tenants, making a tidy profit. Her mam owned the Jack. Got someone else to run and manage it like. Alright for some, I guess. In that small community, they were kind of a big deal. Consequently, when they entered the Jack, they got quite the reception. All village had turned out. Friends, extended family, everyone and their dog practically. Of course, they were then subjected to the usual barrage of overly familiar and unasked for human contact. You know the kind of thing. Back patting, cheek kissing, the odd grope from an overzealous auntie. But after a few pints, Jacob started to ease up a bit. Started to mingle, ingratiate himself, you know. He was just starting to feel halfway comfortable when a couple stepped through the door. Pub went silent. They were only young. Jacob judged about 18 or 19. Yet they strode in with a kind of regal confidence. The silence hung heavy. You could cut the tension with a knife. That's when Ro's dad spoke up. "All hail the Summer King and his May Queen." Everyone cheered, and like that, normality resumed. Turns out, the Summer King were Ro's second cousin William, the May Queen, his girlfriend of quite a few years, Amber. Jacob found himself getting on with them quite well. By the sounds of it, they didn't get out the village much, and were eager to hear about his and Ro's university exploits. "Here, you're running empty. Want to top up?" "Alright. Remember, you need to get an early night though." There you go. Chin chin. Next day, Jacob woke up with a stinking hangover. His recollection of the night after meeting Will and Amber was somewhat blurry. Didn't even remember getting to bed. But despite feeling rancid, Ro was eager to get him involved with all the May Day prep. Seems Belschurch took it quite seriously. The whole community were out getting stuck in, setting up stalls, making wicker effigies, stacking firewood, mending ancient-looking costumes, and of course, erecting a massive maypole. You know, all that kind of jazz. The sleepy little village had become quite the hive of activity. Ro had been tasked with getting the church ready for the following day's festivities, and by proxy so had Jacob. The church were a bit peculiar. Outwardly, what you'd expect from a post-Reformation country church. Whitewashed outer walls, a bell tower, and a small graveyard. But on the inside it were rather different. Jacob couldn't put his finger on it at first, but then he clicked. No cross. In fact, there weren't any trace of any Christian iconography to be found in the place. Instead, hanging from the walls were 10 sets of great antlers, attached to long poles. And strangest of all, where the altar should have been, a carved wooden statue of an horned figure. About its base, baskets of bread and fruit had been left. Ro caught him staring at it. "The Summer King," she whispered. That phrase again. The Summer King. Aside from starting to get quite on his tits, it were beginning to perplex him. Somewhat frustrated, he asked her, "What's it doing here though, in a church?" Where else would it be if not in a holy place? All would be clear on the morrow. This freaked him out a bit. In the 3 years they'd been together, Ro had never shown any inclination towards any kind of religion, and now her words were suddenly tinged with a strange reverence. Made him uneasy. That night, there were a May Day's Eve party at the Jack. Live music, hog roast, big buffet, fire jumping, all that kind of thing. Much like the previous night, the whole of Belschurch had turned out, and once again he found himself getting rather merry. Every time his glass looked a bit in danger of being emptied, Ro's dad would appear and thrust a replacement into his hand, giving him a sly wink. Looking back, it said it were clear her dad had been watching him all night. Especially when he'd started talking to a woman who he found sitting aside from all the revellers. Turned out she were William's mum. He remembered her having this sad look in her eye, whilst trying to force a smile. Kept saying how proud she were of her boy, the Summer King, like his father before him. "I miss him so," she said. Jacob, being rather blunt at the best of times, asked, "Oh, did he leave?" To which she replied, rather oddly, "He's still here, in the fields and the orchards. Nothing has ever gone, not really." Jacob were going to press her on that, but before he could, Ro's dad interjected, thrust a nail into his hand, and gave him a somewhat withering look. He then glanced at Will's mum. "Reckon you should be off home, Mary. You look tired." Last thing Jacob remembered of that night were Ro's dad saying, rather ominously, "Nowt good comes without sacrifice, lad." The rest of the weekend was something of a fractured mess. He remembered getting up with Ro, getting down to the village green, and joining in with the festivities. Remembered the procession from the church, led by William, who at this point was dressed in a deep green tunic, wearing a crown of antlers up on his head. Half remembered drunkenly dancing behind the procession up the hill, to where a great oak stood, and Amber waited, resplendent in a long white robe. He even recalled the words said during the ceremonial marriage between the Summer King and the May Queen, spoken by Ro's dad. "Great Lord Bal, King, bringer of fruitful bounty, dost thou vow to take and hold your queen, to guard her, to watch over her, to stand vigil as a womb grows nourishment for all here assembled? In the presence of all here gathered, dost thou promise to sow thy crimson seed upon our fields and orchards?" "I do." That's where his lucidity came to a swift and abrupt end. Everything seemed to spiral into an almost psychedelic cacophony of cheering, laughter, and somewhere in the distance, weeping. After that, all he could remember was leaving Belschurch and passing by that creepy scarecrow. Only now, it wasn't so threadbare, not as haggard, fuller looking somehow, clad in a deep green tunic. As he sat there pondering where he'd seen that tunic before, Ro turned to him, smiled and said, "They like you." So my advice for you this weekend would be, don't get too shit-faced. Don't know what you might have to remember, eh? Anyway, you best be getting going. Get your head down. Long weekend, Ed. I'll be seeing you. Have a good one.